How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, February 8th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Klay Thompson, the starting shooting guard for the Golden State Warriors, who is currently out right now. He's been out for the past couple of years due to injuries in his legs. Most recently, he had an ACL injury very recently, and going into this season, I believe it was an Achilles tendon injury. So right now I'm hoping that Klay Thompson comes back healthy when he does, but of course he should take its time. But for this profile, what I do with these profiles is because today is Klay Thompson's 31st birthday, I'm going to use this profile just to give a little bit of insight and context into why I believe Klay Thompson for the 2021 season for the 2021 calendar year should be regarded as an elite NBA player, and what I believe is the perfect representation or the closest to perfection you can get to having a 3-and-D player. So, to give you a little bit of background, Klay Thompson he's a 6'6" shooting guard. He's quite arguably one of the greatest three-point shooters of all time, one of the greatest catch-and-shoot three-point shooters of all time. And he, alongside Steph Curry, have ushered in a new era of three-point shooting basketball, of analytics that basically has almost rendered a position of the game, center, is almost irrelevant if they can't even shoot threes. That's how good of a three-point shooter Klay Thompson is and continues to be right now, and he's only 31 years old. So to give a bit of background, he's from LA. His dad, Michael Thompson, played for the LA Lakers, which shows why he's from LA. He would eventually get an offer to play at Washington State. And he would get his start in 2008, 2009. As a freshman, he would average 12 points a game, shooting 40. He would shoot 41% from three and 90% from the free throw line. It's very rare that a freshman had done that. He hadn't replicated those numbers his sophomore or junior year, but the fact that he did it his freshman year should say a little bit as to how good he was. He was named to the Pac-10 All-Freshman team. I mean, that's how old he is, in a sense. He played in the Pac-10, and then as a sophomore, he would go on to be named the most outstanding player of the Great Alaska Shootout Tournament. He would become the fastest Washington State player to 1,000 points, and he would average 19.6 points per game, second in the conference, after he was a midseason candidate for the Wooden Award, and he was named to the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 first team just because because of his good sophomore season. He decided to come back and run it back for his junior year. He would average 21.6 points per game, which would of course lead the conference, averaging 5 rebounds as well, shooting 40% from the field, 39 from three, and 83 from the free throw line. He had established himself as a good enough prospect after his first 3 years to be taken 11th overall in the 2011 NBA draft by the Golden State Warriors, where of course his career would just take off and balloon from there. So, going into Klay Thompson's age 21 season, his rookie season, he would start 29 of the 66 games of the shortened 2011-2012 season, where the Warriors would finish with the 13th best record in the NBA after Steph Curry had won the sportsmanship award, the sportsmanship award the year prior. The Warriors weren't necessarily the team yet, but of course they were slowly working at it there. His rookie season, Klay Thompson would average 12.5 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists a game, numbers that were very similar to his freshman season, as he shot 44% from the field, 41% from three, and he shot 86% from the field. He was taking his shots, and he was getting them, and he was making them at a very high percentage, just to show you how good he was, just to show you how well he was playing. In 2011, 2012, he was named to the All-Rookie First Team, even though he was the 11th pick, which should say he outperformed his expectations in a sense. This would lead into the next season. Going into his 2012-2013 season, this would be Klay Thompson's first season starting for the Golden State Warriors after establishing himself as one of the best rookies in the league. He would start all 82 games in a season where the Warriors would finish with the 6th best record in the West, with a 47-35 record. and looking out to how Klay Thompson would do, he would average 16.6 points per game in his age 22 season, along with 3.7 rebounds, 2.2 assists, and just about a steal per game. He would shoot 42% from the field, 40% from three, the second year in a row in which he'd shoot at least 40% from three, and he would go on to shoot 84% from the line, doing so. He was not necessarily receiving the amount of recognition that you would expect, but of course he was becoming a very respectable player in his own right. This season, the Warriors would beat the Nuggets in the first round. This was 2012-2013. This was after, I believe, Melo left. But they would end up losing in the conference finals to the San Antonio Spurs. The San Antonio Spurs would eventually go on and win the championship this year. No, they would go on and lose to the Miami Heat in the championship this year, but the Spurs did make it to the championship. But this would go into Klay Thompson's age 23 season. In 2013-2014, Klay Thompson would start all 81 of the games that he played in a season where the Golden State Warriors would finish with, yet again, the sixth best record in the NBA, or the sixth best record in the Western Conference. This season, Klay Thompson would up his scoring percentages a little bit more. He would jump from 16 points to 18.4 points per game, averaging 3 rebounds and 2 assists. Just about what he was averaging in rebounds and assists before. This season, he was shooting 44% from the field, which is, he put up 44.4, his highest shooting percentage from the field in a season, even higher than his rookie year. He shot 41.7% from three, which was his career high up until that point. And he shot 79% from the free throw line, which is his career low, but he was still getting up there as a volume scorer. This would be the last time Klay Thompson wasn't averaging 20 points a game. But slowly but surely you could see that he was getting there, as even then he was making almost 3.3 a game, while shooting over 40% from the 3-point line for the third year out of 3 in his NBA career. And coming at the end of the season in 2014, Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry set an NBA record with a combined 484 three-pointers in a season, which of course broke a record, and the NBA was slowly starting to see what the Warriors were becoming, the kind of team they were becoming, a three-point shooting team with Steph Curry and not just him, Klay Thompson doing what he was doing on the defensive end with helping out where he was needed as well. Going into 2015, which would be, of course, or 2014-2015, which would be Klay Thompson's age 24 season, his fourth season in the league. He would start all 77 of the games that he would play in the season, where the Warriors would finish with the best record in the West at 67-15. I think up until that point, that might have been the best record that they've had as a franchise, even since Wilt had been there, or at least the most wins they'd had in a season. And of course, the Splash Brothers were definitely making names for themselves. Klay Thompson in the season would be named to the All-NBA third team for the first time ever in his career. And they would go on, so first of all, in the regular season, he would up his scoring percentage. That season, he would average 21.7 points per game. The first time he'd average at least 20. He averaged 2.9 rebounds, or 3.2 rebounds, along with 2.9 assists, a career high in assists. He averaged 1.1 steals, his career high, the most steals he'd average in a season up until the most recent one that he played. He would shoot 46% from the field, which until then was a career high, 43.9% from three, which was another career high, and 87.9% from the free throw line. So yeah, he was shooting a career high, percentage-wise across the board, while averaging more points, making a lot more three-pointers. In total, he would make 239 three-pointers on the season, finishing behind Steph, of course, as Steph would go on to have an amazing year. as Steph Curry would win his first MVP. They would go into the playoffs where they would sweep the Pelicans in the first round. This is when Anthony Davis was still on the team. They would beat the Memphis Grizzlies in the conference semis, and then they would beat the Rockets 4-1 in the conference finals as James Harden. This was James Harden's MVP, or the season where James Harden was starting to show that he was one of the best players in the NBA, and they would go on to the NBA finals to face off against the Cleveland Cavaliers. They caught a bit of a lucky break because Kevin Love got his arm ripped out of his socket, and Kyrie Irving hurt his ankle in the first game of the finals. But the Warriors still had to beat the team that was in front of them. They were able to beat the Cavaliers, even though LeBron James had an incredible finals. The Warriors were the better team. The Warriors would beat the Cavaliers in 6 games, as Andre Iguodala would win the Finals MVP, and Klay Thompson would win the first ever championship of his NBA of his career, putting up incredible numbers in the playoffs. I mean, even looking at how he played in the playoffs that season, he would average 18.6 points per game, shooting 39% from 3 in the playoffs. So at that point, Klay Thompson was establishing himself as an all-star, a 13 All-NBA player, or at the time, which would be a top 15 player in the league, while increasing his shooting averages all across the board, and still, through his first 4 seasons in the league, still not failing to shoot below. He's still not failing to shoot above 40% from 3 in a season. So this continues. Going into 2015-16 in Klay Thompson's age 25 season, he would start all 80 of the games that he played in a season where Golden State would finish with the best record in the Western Conference, as they won 73 out of the 82 games, the best regular season record an NBA team would ever put up. Steph Curry would win back-to-back MVPs. He would be the first ever unanimous MVP, as Steve Kerr won his first and only Coach of the Year award. In this season, Klay Thompson would up his scoring numbers again. He would average 22 points per game, which is just over what he had up until then was a career high. He had shot 47% from the field, a career high. He had shot 42.5% from 3, which is the second highest he'd put up in a season in his career to the season prior. And he would shoot 87.3% from the free throw line, which is the second highest to the year prior. He would average also 3.8 rebounds, which is a career high, and 2.1 assists. And he would help the Golden State Warriors make it to the playoffs. And this year they would make it an easy run to the finals, as of course Klay Thompson was named to the All-NBA third team for the second and final time up until now for the second time in his career. He would be named an All-Star for the second time as well. And going into the playoffs, the Warriors would beat the Rockets in the first round in 6, as the Rockets finished with the 8th seed. They would beat the Trail Blazers in the second round by 5, as Damian Lillard was starting to win games in the playoffs. They beat the Thunder by 7 after the Thunder were leading 3-2 in the series. Klay Thompson would put up an amazing game 6, and I'm saying Klay Thompson individually, I'm picking him out as he had an incredibly amazing game. Game 7, he played incredibly well too, as the Warriors were able to overcome one of the best teams in OKC, being led by Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. And then they would make it to the NBA Finals, where they would face off against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And after leading 3-1 in the series, they would lose, as LeBron James and Kyrie Irving put up one of the greatest 1-2 punches in NBA Finals history to give Klay Thompson his first NBA Finals loss. So up until that point, he was 1-1 in the finals. But the last 2 years he had played, he had made it to the NBA Finals. This would lead into his 2016-2017 season. The biggest difference between the Warriors roster this year and the year prior was that they had Kevin Durant on their team, a former NBA MVP, who was the best player of the team that they had most recently beat in the Western Conference Finals. Wasn't a good look for KD, but an amazing look for the rest of the Warriors. This year, Klay Thompson would start all 78 of the games that he played in a season where the Warriors would finish with a 67-15 record, the same record that they had when they won the championship the first time. This year, Draymond Green would be named the Defensive Player of the Year, and Bob Myers, of course, the Executive of the Year for pulling off the Kevin Durant trade. in this season, in his age 26 season, Klay Thompson would average 22.3 points per game, which is his career high now, the most points he'd ever averaged in a season to date. He averaged 3.7 rebounds and 2.1 assists, averaging what you normally expect of him in that category, shooting 46.8% from the field, the second highest in his career at that point. 41.4% from three, which up until then continued his 6-year streak in the league since he first got there of shooting 40% from the field in a season. He shot 85% from the free throw line as well. And they were able to make it right back to the playoffs. This time with Kevin Durant, they basically bulldozed their way through the playoffs. They swept the Trailblazers in the first round. They swept the Jazz in the second round. They swept the Spurs in the conference finals, and they lost one game to the Cleveland Cavaliers in the finals, but the Warriors would just end up putting this one away. Kevin Durant would win Finals MVP, and Klay Thompson individually would win his second championship. And in this playoffs, compared to the other two, he would average 15 points a game as the third scoring option. But of course, Klay Thompson was still getting his buckets where he really needed to. He was rarely missing. So you give him the opportunity to play alongside other players. He's just gonna be more wide open, and Klay Thompson is definitely a player you don't want to leave wide open. So going into his next season, into 2017-2018, going into his age 27 season, his 7th year in the league, Klay Thompson would start all 73 games in a season where the Warriors would finish with the second best record in the West, with 54 wins on the season. I think they finished behind the Rockets in terms of overall wins. This season, Klay Thompson would he would average 20 points a game for the season, the lowest he had averaged since he wasn't an All-Star. Like, that's the least amount of points he's averaged in in any of his All-Star seasons. He also averaged 3.8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, shooting 48.8% from the field, 44% from three, which would be the highest he'd shoot from three in a season. And he also went on to shoot 84% from the line, just rarely missing shots, continuing to rarely miss shots, as he would be named an All-Star for the 4th year in a row. And the Golden State Warriors would, of course, steamroll through the playoffs. This time they had some difficulty with Kevin Durant. They beat the Spurs in 5 in the first round. They beat the Pelicans with Anthony Davis a second time, which, of course, got Anthony Davis mad enough to leave the Pelicans eventually. But continuing on, they would beat the Rockets in 7 after they were trailing 3-2 at one point. And the Chris Paul injury would ruin a lot for the Rockets. The Warriors would gain momentum, and of course, Klay Thompson put up some more stellar conference finals performances to get them to the finals, where they would sweep the Cavaliers and win their third championship in a 4-season stretch. Kevin Durant would win his second consecutive Finals MVP. Klay Thompson would win his third NBA championship title as a very important and integral role within a dominant, I would say at this point, dynasty in NBA history. And this would lead into Klay Thompson's most recent season that he played in. And in 2018-19, his age 28 season, he would start all 78 games in a season where the Warriors would finish with the best record in the West at 57-25. Klay Thompson this year would average 21.5 points per game alongside 3.8 rebounds, which ties his career high, and then 2.4 assists per game. He averaged 1.1 steals, which ties with 2014 for the most steals he's ever averaged in a game. He shot 46.7% from the field that season, 40.2% from three, still continuing to not break his streak. That's his 8th straight season, shooting 40% from three. And then he shot 81.6% from the free throw line. Every year except for one, he has shot at least 80% from the free throw line. And then this season, they would beat the Clippers in the first round. This was the year they faced off against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander when he was a rookie for LA. They beat the Rockets in the semifinals, of course, with James Harden and I believe at this point Chris Paul still. They beat the Trailblazers in the conference finals because the Portland Trailblazers had made an amazing run, and then they eventually would lose to Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors in the finals as Klay Thompson, along with Kevin Durant, would suffer some serious injuries, leaving the Raptors to be the much stronger team and eventually pull off the win to beat this dynasty and keep the Warriors from winning 4 championships within a 5-year stretch. But with this, Klay Thompson, like I'm just saying, Klay Thompson was an active. He was an active participant in a team that went to the NBA Finals 5 straight times, 4 of which were against the Cleveland Cavaliers, against LeBron James, which I thought was an incredible rivalry of its time. And since the Warriors won 3 of them, the Warriors were the best. They got the better of them, and Klay Thompson was one of the biggest parts of that. The Warriors wouldn't be where the Warriors are without Klay Thompson, and it just showed within that 5-year stretch. And because of his ACL injury, he had been out for most of the 2019 season and even through the quarantine. And then when he had a chance to come back for this upcoming season, he tore his Achilles like maybe a month or a couple of weeks before the season started. So he wasn't able to play this season. But mark my words, going into 2021, Klay Thompson is definitely an elite shooter. He is what I think he's the perfection of what many people look for when they look for a 3-and-D player. He is a player that has not averaged less than 40% or making 40% of his threes in a season ever in his career, and he's still one of the best defensive players in NBA history. Looking at where he's standing right now, he is, in addition to being a 2-time first-team All-Pac-10 player whose numbers retired by Washington State, he goes, as of right now, he's going down as one of the greatest three-point shooters to ever play the game. He even won an NBA three-point contests. He was named to the All-Defensive Second Team in 2019, his last full year in the league. He was named to the All-NBA Third Team in 2015 and 2016 when the Warriors were winning their first 2 championships. He is a 5-time NBA All-Star and a 3-time NBA champion. And right now he's 31, and I don't think he has. And there's no signs of slowing down that I've seen. And hopefully, as his career continues, there'll be more to say by the time he turns 32. And with that said, I hope all is well. I want to thank everyone for listening to all 22 minutes of this piece. Today is Monday, February 8th, 2021. Happy 31st birthday to Klay Thompson. And if you ever get a chance to watch my boy, he's wearing number 11 for the Golden State Warriors. And with that said, I hope all is well. Happy birthday to Klay. And I have one more elite individual profile following this one. So please stay tuned, and I'll catch you with the piece after this. Thanks once again for listening to my piece, and peace out. I'm James Sims, and this is The Elite.